when you think about the idea of progress in regards to human transformation, I've actually looked at this through a couple of different lenses. And you'd mentioned lenses before. Perspective. Perspective is what I call the sum of context and framing. And really, when you're working within a team, you're working within an organization, you've got a lot of different perspectives. How have you personally navigated the complexities of change, because you have had a very interesting journey and very similar to mine, which is just unique that our different experiences are somewhat shared parallels. And I'm curious is like how that plays in just our own perspectives, but how have you transformed yourself over the last 3 decades or so, 4 decades for that matter?
Yeah, I would say one of the things that I usually say is my most important tool is being curious. So I try all the time to meet very openly. So I try really hard not to, because I know our brains are so fast in putting people into boxes, right? Or things into boxes.
Yeah.
So I'm trying to unlearn that and just, keep a clear, really open mind to
Right.
whatever meets me and being very curious. So I think curiosity is actually one of my greatest tools. And then knowing from that there's always stuff that I can learn, like really telling myself that no matter where I'm aware of or which level I'm at, there's always new stuff that I can learn. So I really try to meet people openly. And that means also that even though some people maybe give you critique or you get like a slap in your face of something, I always try to remember that it's their perspective. And even though I might not fully agree, I can't change that this is actually how they perceive me. So I have to figure out whether I want them to perceive me like that or not, or I should change around it. So I think that is one of the most important tools that I've used throughout my career.
I appreciate that. Being a curious kindergartner. I think we kind of outgrow some of that along our journeys, but if we can come back to that curious mind of a 5, 6, 7, 8 year old and look at the world through that lens of, what can I learn from this experience, or what can I learn from this person? Coming into a relationship, coming into a conversation, even in like all the conversations with the podcast, I come in with an open mind, looking to learn from and maybe challenge my own cognitive bias. Like it's the ancient Greek perspective from Socrates. What he defined as knowledge and wisdom was, I know nothing. And the idea of learning, though, is a challenge. And I think about some of the work that we've done. It's been very challenging working within financial services of encouraging that curiosity, encouraging the ongoing learning. Why is that? Because you've spent time in financial services as well. And I think if I go back, you were building websites in the late 90s, early 2000s, just like I was, CMS, content management systems. And then you got into financial services over that time period. And then now you're back doing entrepreneurial work. But why the struggle? Why the challenge to create space and time to continuously learn? We've done research on this, and we've actually found here in the US, the financial leader invest an hour to 2 or less, and that's about 79% into ongoing learning and development. I just see that so dangerous in the world that we're living in right now. It's almost like if you think about financial services, it's all about managing risk. That's a huge risk.
Mm-hmm.
Why is this?
I agree. I think it's because it's a world of Excel, to make it really short. But I think it comes back to not having the right framework. So that was some of the stuff that I really experimented a lot with when driving these innovation hubs. So I was lucky enough to sort of go into the financial industry and trying to really level out and try out different stuff. So I was a crazy person coming in and trying to turn things around. So building up these innovation hubs, for instance, we tried to create a framework where it was okay to experiment, to play, to do things differently. And that's what's needed. It's needed the space, as we were talking about before. I really think it's very simple, but the Slack needs to be there. There needs to be a framework and a system that kind of holds you to actually doing this, because otherwise you'll just be caught up in your daily tasks. So I usually say that the short-term perspective usually are eating the long-term perspectives for breakfast, right? In these sort of corporate frameworks, often it's so short-term. So it's really hard to create that long-term perspectives on things. So you kind of really need to fight for creating the space for it. But if you succeed in doing so, I think it's very interesting what you can do as a team, actually, if you start working together on being much more long-sighted, being much more into the experimental work, and spending some time on weekly basis on just studying or learning stuff from the ground.
That's a great point. The idea of a lack of frameworks or systems is the impediment to action here. That actually echoes some of the work that we've done utilizing the Kolbe methodology. Are you familiar with Kathy Kolbe and her work over there, by any chance?
No, actually, I haven't heard about that. So that's interesting.
So
now my curious. So
this is going to be interesting, because Kathy Kolbe uses what's called the Kolbe A index, and that looks at how a person naturally takes action or solves a problem. And there are 4 different areas within this framework. You've got what is called fact finding. So how much information do I need? And it's all energy based. How much, one is called follow through, which is about systems and frameworks. One is called quick start. And then one is called implementers. Like, how do you deal with a tangible world? So for example, I'm a 3 fact finder. So I resist a lot of information. I'm a 2 follow through, meaning I'm going to probably go in and look for ways to like shortcut things just naturally. I'm a 9 quick start. So I initiate action or solve problems by just jumping in and like, let's figure this out, pilot things, and really it's trial by error. And if it doesn't work, we don't do that again. If it works, okay, let's work this out again. In financial services, though, through the Kolbe profiles that we have done, and we've done hundreds of them at this point, the traditional financial brand leader or manager will initiate action or solve problems either by fact finding or by following through. That's their initiating action. So without a framework, it makes perfect sense as to why what comes naturally to an entrepreneurial perspective, which tends to initiate action by quick starting, why the framework actually makes them feel better moving forward. I want to pause.
It gives them a bit of control feeling, at least, because that's a big part of what you're saying there as well, that they shouldn't feel too uncomfortable. So it's a way of keeping them still in the comfort zone, but still moving forward.
Yes, and that idea of comfort, like I'm completely comfortable being uncomfortable to the point to where I take ice baths to build that type of resiliency for myself. Now, not everyone is like me. I understand that. But I've made recommendations. If you want to build that, like that AQ, that adaptability quotient, go take ice baths. Go put yourself in uncomfortable situations and just learn through the experience. But I understand that everyone's not like that. And I think
it turns out that we have more and more in common, because I do the same.
Yes.
I like these winter bathing. That's the biggest problem actually being now here in Spain, that it's a bit more difficult to take those really cold ocean jumps at wintertime.
So in Houston, Texas, I mean, it is hot during the summer, but I figured out how to do it. You just have to fill the bathtub up at night. And then from there, you have these big water bottles that you put in the freezer, and you let those, and you can get the water down to about 50 degrees, and it's beautiful. Anyway, that's a whole nother side.
Cool.
For those who are listening or watching, if you want to take ice baths, maybe we need to do a whole podcast about that, because it is about building it's about building your AQ. But the other thing that I've been thinking about too, from a mental model and a framework, because that's how my mind thinks, is EQ plus AQ is greater than IQ, meaning the emotional intelligence, EQ, and adaptability quotient is greater than IQ, just intelligence alone. And I think that's even more true now as we're entering into this age of AI. I think how old you were, and I've been asking a lot of leaders this question, and it's a very rude question, but I'm like, you know what, we're going to get over it really fast. And when we do it as a group, we do it as a team, they all laugh. But I have everyone go around the room and write down on a piece of paper how old they were in 1994, and then they hold that up. And sometimes you'll have people in 1994 who were 30, 35, some people who were in their early 20s, some who were in their teens. In 94, I was 13 years old myself. Some people who were 5 years old, some people who weren't even born yet in these leadership teams. And I said, this is important because in 1994, that was the year that the internet came out. That was the year that it was around before, but it reached the mass consciousness of humanity in 94. And now here we are 30 years later, essentially, and we're entering this whole new period with AI. And there's the collaboration opportunities that come with that. But if we don't have the contextual frameworks, particularly through financial services, I think it's going to be very challenging. Where does, coming back to the framework of EQ plus AQ is greater than IQ, where does EQ, where does emotional intelligence fall in this for you with people?
I think it's important, definitely to take that part in, and you are fully right. It was so funny to listen to how you describe those personalities, because you are right. Certain personalities are probably also attracted to certain industries and jobs in general. So actually taking that into account as well is quite important, I think, as a business leader, that you kind of look at your team and then try to ensure that you have a diverse set of people who have different mindsets when you want to do this in a certain way. So definitely also something to consider.
Well, what's happened though is two things. One, when we look at Kolbe, it's not personality. It's a person's MO, their modus operandi. It's how they naturally take action or solve problems. So it's not personality driven like a DISC or Myers-Briggs, which I think makes it very, very unique. The other thing though that we find is what it's called cognitive cloning, meaning that someone hires someone that operates naturally like they do, and so you don't have the diversity of, maybe not thought is one piece of it, but the diversity of how we solve problems or how we take action. And so we all end up doing the exact same thing over and over and over again. When it comes to some when it comes to some of the models and frameworks that you've worked with organizations and teams through, what have you found that has helped people maybe see things from a different perspective, and when they see different, they begin to think different?
Yeah, we actually, I would say that I try to go quite operational around some of these things. So I actually investigate this. I use different models than what we were just saying, but that doesn't really matter. It's the same thing. But you also go in and then you see, okay, how does this team actually map out? How do we as people actually look at different problems or situations, and what are our filters and all of that? So we kind of from the beginning of knows exactly, is there some parts of this that we are lacking in the team? Are we quite familiar? Like, are we in the same place? Are we very scattered? So we kind of know which bias we are working with when we are taking decisions or when we are working on a project together. So I would say that I would do these point of departures with teams where we go into these discussions. We also work on how would it look like if we succeed? How would it look like if we fail? Because those kinds of questions that are quite interesting also to ask a diverse team, because you get very different perspectives on these kinds of questions. So actually trying in the beginning of something when you want to cooperate, to mitigate for these bias that might be in the team, kind of put them on the table so everybody can see it and you can talk openly about it, is quite valuable. I would say also questions like, how do you actually prefer to be communicated with? How do you solve issues? If you're pushed, how do you then generally react? Those kinds of questions are quite interesting to actually put on the table, I would say.